how is the tourism industry going to survive the effects of the pandemic? The next session is presented by one of TIAC's strategic partners, the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. It covers how the Indigenous tourism sector can survive, rebuild, and recover from the pandemic. L'AITC plaide depuis longtemps en faveur du soutien au développement du tourisme autochtone. Nous tenons à souligner les efforts inlassables que l'Association touristique autochtone du Canada déploie pour appuyer les entreprises autochtones partout au Canada. TIAC has long advocated for the support of Indigenous tourism development. We'd like to recognize ITAC for their tireless efforts to support Indigenous tourism businesses across Canada. Now, here's our next session.
Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. I'm joining you from the shared territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people here in Vancouver. And it's an honor to be with you here this morning for this next TIAC session on of course, stabilizing and rebuilding Indigenous tourism in this country. I'm going to walk us through a presentation this morning. As many of you know, my name is Keith Henry. I'm the President and CEO for the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. And part of the work we do right now is, of course, supporting many Indigenous tourism businesses across the country. So through this session, I'm going to just walk us through a presentation that we've coined, I guess, Stabilize and Rebuild. And I'm just starting the show properly, sorry. Stabilizing and rebuilding. And I'm hoping what it'll do is it'll share insight to, the impacts of the pandemic. We know we're entering the second wave, and we have many businesses that are very worried about the future, but there is plans, and we want to hopefully provide that insight to all of you today through this workshop. So very quickly, I'm sure many of you know, just a bit more about myself. I'm a proud Métis person, born in Thompson, Manitoba. I grew up in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. My original career, I have a degree in education. I started as a teacher. After a few years of that, it wasn't really what I wanted to do. So lo and behold, I ended up in many Indigenous organizations. I've been involved in Indigenous tourism since about 2005. So learned a lot. I've cut my teeth on a lot of issues, whether it's marketing, development, or partnerships, or just where we all fit together as an industry. And the work I do today is working on behalf of, as you can see, an industry-focused, industry-led organization. We're a national nonprofit. We're not government. We're owned and operated by our Indigenous tourism industry. We have a membership base of Indigenous owned and controlled businesses across the country. There's about the last inventory that we sort of updated in 2018-19. We did some more inventory work. Is about 1,700 or so direct tourism businesses. There had been a larger inventory previously, but that was included sort of some secondary Indigenous owned businesses like gas stations and other things that we felt weren't relevant as a direct service. And we have 13 elected board members, one from every province and territory in the country. So I just really quickly, our mission is to provide leadership in the development and marketing of authentic Indigenous tourism. And of course, we want to see our vision is a thriving Indigenous tourism economy, sharing authentic, memorable, and enriching experiences. Now, nothing's ever been so relevant in saying that because the pandemic has really changed the game for all of us. And what I'd like to say is that there's so many different sectors within tourism. Many of you come from, whether you're government, your other industry partners, one of our partners on the call today, or you're in the airline sector or whatever. We just really know that our Indigenous businesses have become extremely vulnerable. And by our own research, they're slightly more vulnerable than a lot of the other tourism sectors because a lot of our businesses are newer. They've been in the last 3 to 5, 6 years. And so they're not as financially healthy and strong to weather a long-term loss of revenue, if I can say it that way. So it's been under this notion that we've helped sort of build the industry over the last number of years, that we've created a number of specific pandemic responses, some of which many of you may have seen over the last few months. And, I work with our board, I work with a very dynamic management team, whether it's Cecilia Poynton, an Indigenous Musqueam representative in our finance, or Sebastian Desnoyers from the Wendat community near Quebec City, or it was our chief marketing officer, or Teresa Ryder, another proud Indigenous person with family connections to the Musqueam Nation, and she's our director of business development. We're very proud of the fact we've been continually working with our core Indigenous leadership group to pivot And that's been the word, like many of you, I'm sure. We've pivoted, it seems like every month or two, because what we saw in March growing in terms of the first wave in April, we just sort of thought that we built a plan at that time thinking, okay, we see this pandemic. We had heard there may be a second and third wave. I think, like you, we all believed that we were hoping it wouldn't come, but here we are on the verge of as a second wave is hitting us now. But anyways, having said that, we immediately pivoted. We did a few things. We created a new action plan, and it was really a significant domestic focus. We knew that the U.S. border was closing. A lot of our businesses were specifically built over the last number of years with a very strong international push, right? I think of Northern Lights Viewing, whether it's Aurora Village or North Star Adventures. Their particular visitors in the Northwest Territories were primarily from Asia, China, Japan, some other US, but really very internationally focused. We had that diverse business over those businesses there to some of the more smaller operators, whether that might have been a small operator in Ontario, that just provides an experience locally. So we really had to figure out in our planning, how were we going to, calibrate to, is there going to be any paying customers? What are the things we're going to do? So we updated our revised action plan. It was in response to our COVID-19. We had to reset all our targets. That was basically launched in April. We set new key performance indicators. We adjusted to the current situation surrounding travel to Canada and how it affects ITAC members. A lot of our members depend heavily on us. I know they may work with some of the provincial or territorial and municipal marketing partners or other national partners like Parks Canada or many other layers of partners. But at the end of the day, I will say that we definitely triage the most hands-on support across this country with our businesses. And again, as I said, we've pivoted from international marketing. And again, I just have to say one more point on this. We at 2019, we had seen the best year ever. I should have said that at the outset. We were coming on $2 billion in direct GDP. That was, sales at the tills were growing, more staff were being hired. And we were just on a trajectory of 20% plus growth a year. And, as many of you saw, within a matter of, here we are, less than a year later, and it's been, nothing but complete destruction of those sales, and we're nowhere near those targets. So it's just been such a high to a low. It's been a challenge. So I want to talk about some of the things we did after we launched the action plan. We made some calls to the federal government. We worked closely with our partners at, within Minister Jolie's office, Minister Miller's office with Indigenous Services. We're always kind of in between those departments federally. We started a lot of advocacy and outreach. We were forced to respond on behalf of our membership to ensure fair and equal access to federally supported programs. I know that the federal government's put a lot of great tools out there, but the challenge we had is a lot of our on-reserve businesses simply didn't qualify. Up until a few months ago, even things like the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, our on-reserve businesses, which is about half of those 1,700 businesses, couldn't even qualify for that federal program because of the EI legislation. It didn't apply to on-reserve businesses. So those are the kind of the nuances we've been dealing with around the advocacy. We've been working to ensure that ITAC members are able to get financial assistance regardless of where they're located in the country. So things like the other thing, like business credit availability program. While those are often funded, many of your businesses, to the operators that are on this call, in this workshop today, you go to banks, the main banks, Royal Bank, BMO, CIBC, but most of our businesses work through what's called the Aboriginal Financial Institution Network. There's about 59 of these agencies across the country. And initially when that program came out, there was not really direct support for that program through the AFIs. So we advocated, and as we know, that's been corrected today. And the third thing we were really advocating for was a much larger access to capital. The B cap is one thing, and $40,000, investments and interest-free and some forgivable loans are great. But the problem is some of our businesses are very sophisticated and they're multi-million-dollar operations, and a $40,000 refinancing option just isn't going to do much to keep those businesses afloat. So we continue to advocate today for larger access to capital with the federal government, and we've been working with Export Development Canada. So some of the impacts of COVID-19, just really quickly, we undertook as part of that initial first wave. We worked with the Conference Board of Canada. We conducted research immediately. We knew that if we didn't lead research, that we weren't sure if people were going to have an eye on the lens of how COVID was impacting our 1,700 businesses. We saw immediate challenges, like many of you. We're not alone in this, but we were seeing at least a 65.9% decline in direct GDP, down from 1.9 billion down to almost 555 million by this year, and we saw employment dropping about 60%. So really a big challenge. Of about 14,000 jobs lost in the first wave. So the challenge we had with this is when we did this research, we expect that we would start rebuilding by the fall. And as we know today, we hope the US border would open by August, September. That hasn't happened. And now we're into a second wave that's putting more restrictions. So we've been tracking the losses by direct GDP by our province and territory, and you can see substantial economic losses. Not just, obviously, these are direct losses to about half those businesses are on reserve. Those are local communities. Some are in urban centers. Some just operate wherever. We take. I'm in Vancouver, whether it's Salmon and Bannock, a restaurant here on West Broadway, or some of the local business up in Haida Gwaii where they've had to shut down because the nation has shut the business down. So the economic losses are substantial by province and territory, and we've been working to make sure that provincial and territorial ministers understand we all need to work to rally to support Indigenous tourism. We've also done things like the grant program. We were very happy. We were advocating for one of the solutions was, $25,000 grants. So today we've approved over 678 Indigenous tourism businesses from across Canada to get up to $25,000 grants. And the grants have been distributed in 6 phases from May to October. And the challenge we had is getting the money from the federal government and out the door has been a challenge. But we've now pushed out over $11 million of actual paid grants to businesses all across this country. And it's, I know it's part of the way that we felt we need to try and stabilize and save a core group of businesses, right? I didn't go into the Conference Board of Canada, but we were projecting losing over 700 businesses in the first wave. So these are things that we had to really try and stabilize, and the grant was a really key program. We're still working at it. And I can say that, even today we're getting thank you notes from our businesses that are saying literally if it wasn't for that $25,000 support, they wouldn't make it. And the other challenge our businesses are having is triaging all the different programs to see what's going to work the most effectively. And what they need is less paperwork and really tangible, timely support. So that program really was a tool for ITAC to work directly with our businesses. So we do have a new strategic plan now. We've had to another pivot we did this year. So we rebuilt our annual plan. We also had a 5-year plan prior. We've had now to completely rebuild it. And we've got a new plan till 2024. And we've sort of identified 3 key sort of phases of this: response, recover, and resilience. And response was things like the grants I just talked about, doing the Conference Board of Canada research. Recovery was when we would start getting back into marketing and more aggressively. The problem is now, like today, second wave forces us back to response. So this plan was built so that we would go back and forth between the different phases, depending on market conditions. Another really key element is that we all know we're going to have to focus on domestic tourism. The COVID realities are that, international travel is going to be very challenging. We're not going to have 23 million visitors back to Canada anytime soon, which was a record-breaking year of all of us know last year. And so we're working our way through that. And so we released just recently, over just about 2 weeks ago, we commissioned Insignia Marketing Research to conduct additional research on both the relevance and potential for Indigenous tourism and cultural experiences within the domestic travel market. We're trying to pivot again. We know that our business that relied heavily on international are going to have to think differently about how they're going to market locally now to Canadians. And there is an audience. And the objective was to understand what's the traveler's mindset, needs, states, and behaviors. And we found some very interesting highlights from that research. We know that attitudes have shifted to embrace a slower, more mindful pace of life with loved ones. I think that goes to say people are appreciating the world around them a lot more, and people want to appreciate nature, simplicity, and spirituality and soulfulness. That speaks to a lot of the kind of rich experiences that many of most of our Indigenous tourism businesses, we have some that are larger, but a lot of them focus on small groups, small family units, individual experiences. These are things that we believe really will connect people back to land and place. And I think that's really going to be key to the resurgence of the entire industry, if I can be so bold to say that today. We think that travel-related behavior, the research saw that travel-related behavioral shifts include a major surge in road trips taken within the province. No surprise. The COVID-19 specific travel strategy and executional plan is needed. So our businesses, we're trying to work to make sure they understand how we're going to deal with that domestic marketing strategy now. And federally, there needs to be more resources placed on leveraging the value of Indigenous tourism. What was the biggest thing is we did focus groups, a number of them across the country with 60 individuals, some family units, different age demographics. They had a hard time really going through all our layers of marketing partners and organizations. We just need more tactical work in terms of making sure Canadians know where to find Indigenous tourism. Some other key highlights: invest in optimizing the digital experience to ensure all offerings have prominent positioning. Develop a step-by-step toolkit specifically designed for grassroots and guerrilla tactics. So these are the things we're working with our businesses now, and of course our Indigenous provincial territorial partners to make sure we all create those toolkits to help the businesses recalibrate, I keep saying, and become highly visible and alluring to travelers by speaking to their COVID-19 need states and be the hidden gem experience thereafter. I mean, we've created health and safety standards as guides now, a standard for all areas of Indigenous tourism business, whether you're restaurants, whether you're hotels, whether you're outdoor adventure. We've created a series of tools to help support that. And press for recognition on all local destination marketing organization and provincial marketing organization websites. You know, it was interesting because we know we work a lot with things like North Star 22 and many partners that are probably watching today. But, you know, when the consumer really tries to dive into purchasing or locating, we do have to collectively do a more effective job on placing Indigenous content, because what this really showed and is what we saw was that Canadians are extremely interested in Indigenous tourism. This was a non-Indigenous focus groups held throughout the country. I didn't get into all the tactics of this. The full research is on our website, indgenous-tourism.ca/corporate, if you want to go to look at some of this research. And Canadians are really motivated to experience Indigenous tourism like never before, and subject to barriers, you know, and travel restrictions lifting. We'll see more and more of that. So it's in everyone's collective interest to do that. So as when we saw the first wave end and we started getting into some of the other tactics we could do for marketing, we ran an escape from home marketing, domestic marketing campaign. I hope people saw it. We ran TV commercials. We ran a number of sort of posters. We created the launch of, you know, we supported the enhancement of Destination Indigenous that was launched last year at our International Indigenous Tourism Conference. So we really saw significant engagements, and it just went to continue to prove that Canadians really want to experience Indigenous tourism. We just need to figure out how we can help them find all these experiences. Now, how are we addressing the second wave? You know, it's really critical now. Like, we started to make all those, we were doing the grants, we were doing some domestic marketing, but now here we sit and we're seeing restrictions become more challenging for many of our businesses. And the prospect of winter tourism for many of our businesses is going to be, you know, probably almost none. And we were really, as a sector within the tourism industry, we were really depending, I know many of our businesses were really depending on Canadians getting out this winter. So we're now pivoting again to create and new solutions to sustain member businesses. And it's become a really big challenge for us. And what I will say is we've been hosting a series of webinars. I'm just going to bring one other document up. So, sorry about that. Got this on wrong. What I want to say is we've been creating a series of documents now, a series of webinars, pardon me, to actually help our businesses understand this research, understand the things we're doing, help them rebuild, help them stabilize, give them the tools and the information so that they can somehow figure out a way to make it through this. And we're leading that marketing. So this week on Thursday, for those that are interested, we're hosting a webinar. We're going to be talking about our second wave response. And the fact is, we continue to say the COVID second wave could destroy Indigenous tourism. It is that much of a crisis right now. And so we are working as effectively as we can to try and figure out how we're going to do that. The first wave, we thought we were estimating we could lose about 714 businesses. Now, we don't know exact numbers of we've lost, but we know we've lost businesses because we've been getting those reports. We're worried that the second wave could be a loss of potentially another 486 or so, or 500 businesses, pardon me. So, you know, when we look at how do we rebuild post-COVID, we're going to have to figure out if we can stabilize this and not lose to that. If we get to 486, we've lost 30 years of Indigenous tourism progress. There was, In 2002, there was about 850 businesses in the country. So we built back to the 1990 levels. So it's a big challenge for us. We can see the destruction of that. So here's what we're proposing. I won't get into the details of this, and we're going to go with this a bit more in our webinar this week that ITAC is hosting. We want to really continue to build a really strong marketing campaign, a major piece. We also want to be creating an Indigenous tourism incentive program where visitors are paid on receipt of going to Indigenous tourism, whether that's 10% reimbursement, 15%, 25%. These are the tactics we're proposing to partners right now. We have no idea if this is going to get supported or not, but we believe that we need to create an incentive travel program to help our Indigenous tourism businesses stabilize as best they can. And the second way, we want to actually top up the investment grants. We want to go from 25,000 per business to 35,000. And there was an additional 150 businesses that couldn't be helped in wave one. We were oversubscribed at $16 million, 16.2 million or so in total funding for that program. We had about 20 million in applications. So we want to top up and try and help those 150 businesses that we want to try and help support and save and maintain the 683 or so businesses that actually got supported. And finally, the third major component of our second wave response will be around building a crisis call center. We've been doing constant research. The fact remains that our businesses just aren't accessing federal or provincial or territorial. There's all sorts of layers of programs, and it's very confusing. There's a lot of paperwork, and businesses are extremely overwhelmed from the Indigenous tourism industry. So right now, we're just trying to find our way to how do we actually create, a longer standing support for those businesses so that they can, of course, try and meander their way through it and find out which programs are the most effective. So we want to triage a call center where we're helping businesses one-on-one with our team members. So these are I just wanted to cut out to that briefly and just share with everyone and let people know that we are working on an additional second wave set of tactics we think needs to happen. We have no support for it yet. We're just want to show leadership on this issue and let our members know that they're not alone, and it's a very, very trying time for sure. So finally, I just want to share with you, we have done our best to really continue to build video assets, and I'm just going to show one video and then I'll cut to the end, but I really think it's important that we understand the messaging of how we've been trying to reopen Indigenous tourism.
We know confinement has been hard, locked in and isolated these past few months. As the country slowly reopens, the tourism industry needs your support more than ever. Whether you're looking for a staycation, a quick getaway, or a family vacation, consider an Indigenous tourism experience as your next destination. We have taken all of the safety measures to welcome you, and with over 400 Indigenous experiences open, we know that you'll find the right escape. Discover your authentic Indigenous experience at destinationindigenous.ca.
Some of you may have seen that commercial. We ran it and we still run them. We've been trying to work our way to help try and drive more awareness in business, and it's all part of the marketing challenges we have. So, really with that, I just think that we know that we're going to stabilize and rebuild Indigenous tourism. We have a plan, we have a strategy. Of course, we're very concerned about the market realities. We continue to advocate for what our Indigenous businesses need, and I would say to everyone, we're going to have to collectively, I know we have to work together and support all sectors in tourism. Indigenous tourism is, we saw through the consumer research, it's one of the top interests for many consumers in this country. And as we look at stabilizing, rebuilding, we really hope that becomes just a priority for all partners, that we include Indigenous tourism in the work into the future. So with that, I guess I will stop there. I tried to rush through. I know it was a significant a limited amount of time to get through this, but I wanted to give some time for Q&A. And I've got Sebastian, I guess my colleague, our Chief Marketing Officer, online with me. He's got that little fish in his hand there, I see, and he's waving to us now. So Sebastian, I'll just turn it over to see if there's any questions from any of the folks in the workshop, and hopefully I've given people some thought around how we're organizing and how we are going to stabilize Indigenous tourism in Canada.
Hi. So we don't have yet any questions. So please, if there's any question for Keith, you can just put it into the chat box, and then I'll make sure to transfer those information to Keith.
So Sebastian, I think there might have been a question you had at all, or you had, I think, I think when we talk, we're getting a bit of feedback, so I'll try and mute when you talk and vice versa. But there were some questions you had, so did you want to maybe ask me one or two of those questions and maybe give people some thought around what we're trying to do as industry?
Yes, of course, Keith. So, I mean, obviously, there was a few questions that were asked prior to this session. So, some people were asking, can you specifically talk about ITAC recovery strategy and some of the marketing initiatives? I mean, you already talked about a few of them, but is there anything else in the planning for ITAC?
Yeah, I mean, so I shared with you guys, I mean, I know I really glanced over, but I hope people saw we did we've enhanced what we created last year. We announced a year ago, Destination Indigenous as the website platform for consumers. I'm sure many people, I hope people have had a chance to go look at destinationindigenous.ca. I mean, those are very, very important pieces for our marketing work into the future. The other thing is we've done tactical campaigns like Escape from Home. So I mean, there's been a lot of work. What we are planning now is a much longer 52-week program, I guess, that I don't really want to say too much about, but we absolutely have a plan. What we saw through the research is we just need to amplify Indigenous tourism and where to find the businesses. And, I know that many of you try very hard to build Indigenous tourism. I just want to say that, if you haven't been to Destination Indigenous, we've created this interactive tool, and it's good for tour operators, it's good for tourism partners. If nothing else, I would say to people, really refer people to this platform because these are market ready / export ready businesses. And we've created a map, an interactive map. I know many of you have been here. I'm just bringing it up for, and we are trying to continually add content. And what it also does is you can see on the screen, whether it's Abenaki Museum, you see that they're temporarily closed. It'll give you the facts of, are they open, are they not, are they ready they have limited operations. So we've continued, we haven't sat still, we've continued to build these tools. And I think it's really important. And if you've been on the site, you'll see that we've created all sorts of packages, experiences. So we're really trying to pivot and trying to drive, in some cases, direct sales. In other cases, we're just trying to continue to move our way through whatever we can to excite consumers. I think the challenge people have is how do we find people to the actual experience that is open or not? And I would say that this is probably one of the most effective tools in the country right now. And of course, there's partners like Quebec Aboriginal Tourism or Quebec Indigenous Tourism, Indigenous Tourism BC, Indigenous Tourism Alberta. We have a network of partners that continues to curate this content for you.
There's a question now, Keith. How can the provincial and territorial governments support ITAC's initiatives?
Well, I think what I would suggest that, people we seem to be hesitant to say we need resources, but we do. And it's not just ITAC, so provincial and territorial partners. What I would say is that I would just encourage them to work closely where we have an Indigenous tourism partner with us, whether in BC, Indigenous Tourism BC, in Alberta, Indigenous Tourism Alberta, in Manitoba, Manitoba Indigenous Tourism Association, Quebec Aboriginal Tourism. We have some parts of the country we don't have an established organization. I would say, if you don't have an existing relationship, it starts with an email to myself, Keith at indigenoustourisim.ca. We work our way through some of the strategy. We create a strategy because having no strategy, which is what I see, like in some of the provinces and territories to support Indigenous tourism, is going to absolutely destroy some of the businesses that are there. And I know many people are trying I see many familiar names here. I know people are trying to stabilize the industry, but we just don't have enough paying customers right now. We don't have the right program tools. So there's a couple ways. One is a relationship. The other is, how are you connecting with the real needs of those local businesses? Do you know who the inventory businesses are in your province and territory? And these are the kind of things we can work our way through to create a strategy around that.
Perfect, Keith. And another question, do you have the timelines for when you would like some of the new initiative to launch?
Well, it's difficult because we don't want to push the federal government hard. We know that everyone's on them for resources. Our ask is very modest. We hope that we need this now. I'm going to say that I don't want to dramatize this because I'm a very pragmatic and practical person, but the phone calls I take, businesses are on life support, many of them. And Have we lost 714 in the first wave? It's not clear if we've lost them all or if a bunch hibernated, but there's definitely many operations that have gone quiet. So we're going to inventory that as part of our strategy. So I would say that we need these resources as soon as possible, because what I can say with great confidence, our stimulus grants and our marketing support is the only lifeline for many of these hundreds of these businesses right now, keeping them afloat. So I think ITAC creates a really strong tool that we have to do that.
One very last question, Keith, because we have about 1 minute left. How can non-Indigenous operators work with Indigenous operators in promotion and partnering on initiatives and itineraries?
Well, I think it's include them. I mean, I know some people reach out, maybe they're not getting the response. I would say if it's a marketing piece like that, this is where someone like Sebastian on our team can help triage that. Sebastian is our chief marketing officer with his team. If you reach out to a local business or a provincial, territorial, Indigenous tourism partner and not responding, reach out to Sebastian. We want to make this work. No matter how many times we've tried in the past and maybe it hasn't worked, we got to keep pushing, because right now we need each other more than ever. And you know, I've seen this industry like start from such modest places to see where it is today. I am hugely fearful of the future right now if we don't get more partnerships and more ways to drive what little business we can for many of these businesses. It could be the matter of pure insolvency and disappearing to full bankruptcy to whatever. And the other side I really worry about is the sentiment. So we need your partnerships. The more we see partners rallying to support our industry, I think it builds positive messaging in our industry. We see so much, I hear so much defeatism, so much loss of hope. I hear it continually. I have to catch myself without getting caught up in it too much. But it's really so, people are so scared of the future right now. And you know, for some of our Indigenous operators, they've whatever they could leverage, they've done that. They're now selling assets, they're selling things, and we gotta find a way. We need everyone to help us with that. And if you can help us, then like I said, if you can't get a hold of that business directly, maybe because they're gone. But if worse comes to worse, you email Sebastian and our marketing team will help triage that. And that goes back to the whole reason why in our third piece of our second wave, ITAC really needs to triage these issues, because there's a big void there in many cases, and we got to fill that.
That's about all the time we had, Keith. So thank you so much. Thanks for all the questions, and we wish you obviously a pleasant day and a good TIAC conference.
Thank you, everyone.
That was a great session. I know I learned a lot. We're going to take a short networking break, and we'll come back for our first keynote speaker. Renowned futurist Nicholas Badminton will share his ideas on what Canada's tourism industry might look like post-COVID-19. Nous reviendrons pour écouter notre premier conférencier de marque. Nicholas Badminton, prévisionniste réputé, nous fera part de ses idées pour l'avenir de l'industrie touristique canadienne au lendemain de la crise de COVID-19. I'll see you on the main stage at 2:30 p.m. Eastern.